our obsession is with the foot. So we want to make sure that not only do we look at how the foot functions, but also the shape of the foot. If you look at the foot, this bone here, the calcaneus bone, is naturally rounded. That's to allow for a smoother landing during foot strike. So we've done exactly the same thing with this softer crash pad on the Vomero. On the women's shoe, we've actually radiused that a little more aggressively, because you know that women need a little smoother landing. There's a lot of differences between male runners and female runners. You think of the average body weight of a female, it's typically 10 to 15% less than a male. So obviously how we engineer our cushioning systems, how we engineer certain support systems has to be different. The other thing that we notice, because there's a wider Q angle, so women have slightly wider hips, so the angle between the hip and the knee tends to be a little more exaggerated. They can need a little more support than men, so we also always try to think about that as we engineer our shoes. On the men's shoe, although we have an isolated crash pad, it's not quite as beveled as the women's shoe. That's because men have a higher body mass and typically can compress this area a little more effectively than women. So we don't isolate it quite as much, we don't bevel it quite as much, because we know that with that added pressure we're still going to get that smooth transition if we still have that isolated crash pad area. Also on the medial side of the shoe, just going back to that Q angle kind of comment that I made, we don't have the arch support in the male shoe. We have the CPU. We know CPU is a nice dynamic stretch material that offers great support and fit. On the women's shoe, we want to enhance that with the arch fit. On the men's, we know that CPU works just fine, so we go with CPU on the men's shoe. Also little things like the flex grooves up here on the forefoot. We want to make sure that we get a nice flexible shoe on the men's side, but we don't cut into it, cut into the midsole quite as aggressively as we do on the women's side. The reason that we cut in aggressively on the women's shoe is because of the lower body weight. It takes a little bit more for them to flex the shoe. We know that if you're heavier, it's a little bit easier to flex that shoe. So we want to make the men's shoe appropriately flexible for men.